everyone, thank you for joining us today on our first PPA Table Talks. Very excited. I'm Ryan Reid. I am the Equality and Diversities Officer.
My name's Larissa. I'm the Media Manager here at PPA.
Okay, I'm Valerie Kaneko-Lucas. I'm the Academic Leader here at PPA.
And I'm Wai. I'm the Admissions Officer at PPA.
And so basically we wanted to kind of get together and have a chat about a hashtag that has been floating around on social media. Some of you might have seen it, hashtag StopAsian Hate. And I think people are kind of wondering, what does that mean? And we thought we'd kind of just break it down. There's a lot of words like hate crimes, unconscious bias, and you've probably heard all those floating around. So we thought we'd just get together, have a chat, and see what everyone's view is. And I think also it's good to have members of the Asian community with us today to hear how, you know, like me, I'm not part of the Asian community, to hear how I can be a good ally, what I know, and just kind of have a deeper conversation. When did you first hear about Stop Asian Hate?
Well, I think the hashtag first appeared, at least my first knowledge of it, was on social media. It was on Twitter, it was on Facebook, and it related to the murder of 6 Asian women at a massage parlor in Georgia.
Yes.
In March of 2021. And it was covered, interestingly, by some of the fashion magazines here, like Marie Claire covered it, and it was interesting that even things like Al Jazeera were covering it. So it looked like it was a pretty important moment.
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? I actually felt that I didn't really see any mainstream news covering it. I saw it more on social media, which I thought was an interesting one, because I was like, it was the hashtag. And then with Black Lives Matter, I saw it really kind of covered massively on ITN News, BBC News. And this one I didn't. So I found I had to kind of research a lot more myself to kind of find out what the hashtag was about. I don't know if anyone else had that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw it on social media first, but I saw the hashtag maybe like February, and then I obviously saw it kind of increase when the shooting happened. But yeah, even a shooting itself, I didn't really see it in the news until, you know, I saw it on social media first by a good half a day at least, and then kind of saw it on mainstream, and Sky News, BBC a bit later on.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, so for me, it was much more personal because we have family, a close family and friends in the States. And I started to hear about early in the year when there was reports of attacks on elderly Asian citizens in the Bay Area, which is near where we used to live. And so I was hearing it from friends, and then it was popping up on, you know, my friends' social media accounts, and then the hashtag started appearing more on social media. But you're right, Ryan, I don't think I really saw much reporting in the mainstream news.
No.
More just sort of word of mouth for me.
And maybe not many people realize what the Asian community go through. I think sometimes there's this like stereotype of like, oh, well, they're like, you know, it's fine for the kind of minority. They kind of, oh, it's a few jokes that they get, but that's it. And actually, if you look back, it's a lot more, there's a lot of history. There's been a lot of hate crimes towards the Asian community that maybe we weren't so aware of. And I think that's a good thing from, not a good thing from COVID, but that's the one thing from COVID where we sat down and we can't be distracted by other things.
Yeah, I'm not sure about you guys, but I definitely think the Asian community has always been seen as quite submissive. I feel like, you know, there's always been microaggressions within like jokes and things like that, but there's always been kind of a butt of a joke, but, you know, not taking that seriously, because, you know, they're submissive, they'll take it.
Microaggressions are sort of seen as positive things, you know, like you're good at maths, or those jokes, you know, about being good at maths, or, you know, violin lessons, that sort of thing, are the kind of microaggressions I've experienced. You know, so I think that's always happened, but definitely living in California, I haven't lived in any other parts of the States, but in California as an Asian person, it was definitely, because I left just shortly before COVID happened, and so it was very positive stereotypes, and it was sort of, the Asians were seen as the safe minority, or the good minority, if you want to put it that way, and that in itself is, you know, a microaggression, so, or unconscious bias. So it's kind of very interesting for me to see, having just left and then seeing how it flipped so quickly after COVID. So very, very interesting to see that.
Definitely. I mean, there's the whole thing with East Asians as being the model minority,
right?
You know, and I think were perceived as not having problems. You had the first generation who, ran the Chinese restaurants or, did manual labor and they worked hard. Second and third generation is seen as, you guys are economically successful, you're professionals. I mean, my cousin went to Lowell High School in San Francisco, and at that time the parents complained because the admission was solely on grades to an elite academic high school. And the parents complained because the proportion of Asians was so high that they said, these guys are sort of acing out everybody else. But the model minority thing, I think it's things that I think as a community we're really proud of. But the downside is it's used as a stick to beat other, ethnic groups. Like, why can't you be good at math like the Asians? Or why can't you be quiet and, not complain? And culturally, I think we are seen as submissive because culturally, at least with my family, you complain, you lose face. You are admitting that something bad is going on in your life. And you don't want other people to look at you and think, oh, you're the problem guy, or you're the problem family, or you're the person that just isn't trying to assimilate and be quiet about what other people are seeing as humorous or, just a joke. Yeah. And I think that is a problem for us because it's that fear about speaking up. I think that's probably more the case for people, say my parents or grandparents' generation than our generation. Well, certainly in my family, people my age are always seen as, why are you guys always complaining? Why are you so mouthy? It's no big deal. Nobody died until.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was interesting also to find out for me that, I'd always lived that sort of positive experience or positive viewpoint of Asians in America. But so just finding out that actually Asian hate in America is not new at all. It's just gone around in this cycle. Finding out some of the very dark history of Asians in America and of how the population was treated previously. So my father-in-law, who's white, his generation, he remembers Japanese internment camps, and sort of, so post the Korean War and World War II, Japanese, were seen as, they were seen negatively, and it was the same thing as it is now, where all Asians are seen as the same, even though the target, the hate was directed at Japanese, but anyone that looked Asian was the same. They were Japanese as much as anyone else. And I think that's the same that's happening now after COVID. It's the hatred is directed at China, but anyone who looks remotely Asian is a target. So this isn't new. It's just we're seeing it again, couple of generations in, and it's, it's happened very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Having a president who will go, the China virus, and hearing that ignorance, I think people also didn't really realize, by saying these ignorant things, it sounds really silly saying people didn't realize, but that's the ignorance of it, what impact that has.
Kind of goes towards it, doesn't it? Those little comments, kind of leads to the unconscious bias, but people just have a negative view of it. When you do go into an Asian supermarket or you go to get a Chinese takeaway, there's those things that, when you hear it so constantly in the media, etc.
That's, I think, the basis of some of the hate crimes, though.
It definitely is.
Yeah, the young Singaporean student who was attacked by 4 teenagers, and one of them said, "We don't want your fucking virus in our country." So that there is that sense that any Asian face must be Chinese and therefore is disease-ridden. There is a kind of, it's a serious thing, but at the beginning in March last year, when we first had lockdown, I noticed that I could clear an entire aisle of Sainsbury's just by having an Asian face. I'm there with my face mask, and some guy turns around and goes, "Oh my God, it's an Asian!" And he and his cart round the corner at top speed. So yeah, it's prejudice. Yes, it's a kind of microaggression, but I thought, actually, this is working to my advantage.
Definitely have the same, Dr. Ali. March last year, you could walk down a pavement and people would run across the road. Like someone else was behind me, they just carry on. Yeah, it was, really interesting. And I know you mentioned about obviously the president. Obviously, when Trump was in, obviously it's much worse. But even in the media here, I mean, there's statistics whenever there's an article about COVID, it was up to like 40% was always a picture of an Asian person rather than any other minority. Mm-hmm. You got to think when a media is subtly hinting things like that with who they picture within their newspapers or in the news, you know, it's constantly subliminal. It's subliminal.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
These subtle microaggressions.
Yeah.
Do you know, another thing I thought was really interesting was, I think with Black Lives Matter and other social movements, we have a lot of mainstream Black celebrities who would call things out. And we were just talking, I was like, actually, what celebrities of the Asian community are very prolific on our kind of morning shows, on our, you know, radio shows, that would call it out so it was really mainstream? Because I was like, actually, I remember watching with Black Lives Matter and Alison Hammond talking about her experience. Yeah. And it kind of stopped everyone because like we'd seen her on TV being this happy, bubbly personality, this presenter, and then she just kind of gave us the real talk. And, you know, I was trying to think of actually who would be that person in Britain, because sometimes that is what kind of cuts across to people when they can kind of see someone they see normally and they see this trauma affect someone. And I was thinking a video that really shocked me was there's a Broadway performer and she did this Instagram video. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't actually seen any other kind of celebrities of the Asian culture say something. And I was like, actually, that is a really big tool when it comes to social media activism. And I just wonder sometimes, is that why, did that slow down it being such a big thing in the media?
Well, I'm thinking George Takei, who actually was I think he was Mr. Solo in Star Trek. Yeah. I mean, he's spoken out about that. And also, interestingly, he actually helped. Well, I guess it was his story that became the story of a musical called Allegiance that premiered on Broadway. Yeah, and that was the story of the Japanese Americans who were interned during the Second World War, you know, done as a musical. But I think, well, in the UK, you do have actors, like people like, you know, Daniel York Lowe, who's spoken out about the idea of, you know, the fact that the streets are no longer safe for people of East Asian heritage. And he was also part of the group that set up the campaign against the RSC on their casting of a Chinese classic in which all the characters should have been Chinese, but the leads were given to non-Asian actors.
Right.
But in terms of the UK, as far as I can tell, most of the people speaking out have been journalists, you know, people like Kate Nung of The Independent. She was the one that recorded the 457 Asian hate crimes that were done between the start of COVID and I think it was March or April 2021.
We were kind of discussing it and I was like, actually, it's just interesting how I do think that has like a link with how it hasn't really been on the mainstream, because sometimes it's like the way the world is set up and it's like, oh, well, if, you know, this big artist or this big singer or TV personality kind of comes out and says something. But I was like, actually, there's a problem there as well, because we don't have, I don't think, that many mainstream, especially in the UK.
No, and that's probably the conversation we should be having, is about you know, the lack of representation in, you know, in our mainstream media of Asians in this country, especially. And there was just starting to be a kind of rise in it with, you know, the popular movies, you know, what was it, Crazy Rich Asians and that sort of thing. People were kind of, you know, starting to be known, but I mean, I can't think of a single person that I've seen in the mainstream at all.
I suppose the only person I can think of who's really mainstream was I think the girl who played Cho Chung in Harry Potter. Yeah. But she's still quite a young actress. Yeah.
Well, there's Gemma Chow.
Gemma.
She
From Humans.
Humans, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In the Eternals, you know, new Marvel film. And then I was like, Gok Wan, I guess, in a British kind of presentery kind of, but then that's why I was like, God, there's two. That's all I could really think of off the top of my head. Obviously, if I sat down with a piece of paper for half an hour or, you know, longer, but I thought off the top of my head, one thing I think about being an ally is who can I speak for who's not in the room? You know, so if there's someone who has a disability and they're not in the room, I will speak for them if that's spoken about. That's one thing I try and think to be a good ally is how can I help others who aren't in the room or aren't in the same space as me and put their point across.
Say possibly also the whole idea of see it and call it out.
Yeah.
Certainly for the George Floyd case, there were bystanders who filmed what was going on, and that became testimony in the trial. But this, I guess, people sometimes are afraid. You know, if you call somebody out for some comment like "go back to China," you know, what's going to happen? And yeah, I can understand that, but I think you could also kind of be slightly naive and say, "I don't understand why you said that. You know, can you tell me more about it?" So that it's not so much a confrontation,
Yes,
as a conversation, if that person wants to engage with you. And there is also the sense that if somebody is being racially abused, to know that someone else has noticed. Yeah, I think that's important.
yes.
You know, even if you don't directly intervene, is important, because at least that person knows they've been witnessed. You know, they're
not on their own, because sometimes it can feel like it's just in your head. Like, did they say that? Did I imagine that? Was that? Did I take that on to heart? Because I think sometimes, being of an ethnic minority, sometimes you are made to feel like, oh, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't. Did they really say that? Did they really mean that? I think they just meant this, you know. And actually, it's so true. If someone else is going, I saw that. There's a look of I saw that. I supported this. This isn't going to go any further because I'm here watching. I totally agree with you. I think that is.
Yeah, but even just having that person there, the eye contact, kind of knowing what's going on. I mean, I've had situations, mainly around here as well. People shouting Corona at you. I've had that actually more than once, which you know, throughout the whole year, it wasn't just recently. The first time I think was either late March or start of April last year. So I mean, it's just having that other person there being like, oh, do they really just say that, and having that support is I think really important as well.
Yeah, there's possibly also the sense of don't take the easy way out about understanding other cultures. Yeah, because presently a lot of media stereotypes about not just Asians, ethnic minorities are quite caricatured. You know, they don't really represent what real humans live and think and feel. And if you are working with people from other cultures, the idea of just having a chat, you know, about well, not, you know, you're Asian, what's it like to be Asian, but just, you know, trying to understand other people's cultures, or having, you know, getting to know them, I think is quite important.
What I was going to say about allyship is it's important to listen and to ask questions, because not only is the sort of, you know, Asian so broad in terms of culture and different places that people come from, different lives, but everyone is an individual as well. So it's just really important to have dialogue and not to see everybody as the same, because so many Asians are, you know, from different, not just from different cultures, but we're all individuals as well. And my experience is completely different to Larissa's or Valerie's or anybody else's. And I might feel differently about some things, and we might all have something different to say about it. So there's no black or white or one size fits all. So it's really important as an ally to keep asking questions and to talk about things, you know, with everybody.
I think, another point out on that, I think, is just being empathetic. I think, for me personally, I'm just, I would listen to people, and I'm quite empathetic to people with rich backgrounds, like, love to know more about it, you know, quite open to it. And I just think that's another kind of key point as well.
It is so true. That's so true. Just seeing how the other half lives. Like, I think that's so important, is to kind of go, I can empathize with you. Empathy is a big, now you said that empathy is a really, really big thing, universally in any kind of subject, you know. A lot of people get caught up in that, is the guilt. So they don't try to learn, or don't want to further their learning because the guilt stops them. And I've seen that actually happen personally quite a lot of times. And I think that's a really good point to raise, is actually to leave the guilt at the door.
Yeah. To learn about the past and to say, oh my God, I feel really bad about that. That's so horrible. It happened. Well, good, you understand it. But it's sort of like, has that past led on to anything in our present? Because that's the thing you can do something about. Yeah, I think we're working in a creative world here, you know, and if you are in the position to hire Asians or, you know, ethnic minority people, do it. You know, the talent is out there. You look at even very commercial films like Crazy Rich Asians, you look at Nomadland, you know, the talent is out there, but also think broad when you are casting. In other words, don't say, well, there's no Chinese role or there's no East Asian role in this play. Could that be cast more diversely? Yeah, creatives, be imaginative, you know. It's theater, it's acting. You don't necessarily have to be the ethnicity of the character unless it's specifically written that way. And also I'd say for writers, if you are specifically writing an ethnic role, think about what preconceptions you have about that before you put your pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard.
In the stats and in general, I've got a cousin who owns a Chinese takeaway, and the amount of people who aren't getting Chinese takeaway now, compared, and obviously takeaways they're quite busy at the moment because obviously everyone's at home, and you know, it does seem like that bit of unconscious bias. You think, oh no, I don't want to go to a Chinese takeaway because I don't want to catch anything, this and that. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of Asian businesses that are struggling.
Yeah, and it isn't just unconscious. I mean, I've seen some horrible comments on Facebook, like local groups, where people have said, oh, I wouldn't go near the Chinese place, you know, that sort of thing at the moment. So there is, yeah, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of where that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I even saw, I don't know if you guys saw when Boris Johnson done his Happy Chinese New Year, Happy Lunar Year, and the backlash just in the UK, but he got the amount of comments, the amount of complaints to BBC for it. I mean, yeah, just a little comment like that. And
yeah, it was horrific.
What do you think will be the impact on the Asian community after COVID? And that's probably a really hard one to kind of be like, there we go.
Interesting. That is, it's hard to say because we're in the middle of it. I mean, the one thing I suppose that is positive, speaking of people in power, is Kate Owen, who's the MP for Luton. She raised in Parliament the questions of Asian hate crime, you know, and said that this should be formally investigated. Now, whether that goes forward in the future, Lord only knows, but, you know, at least that's been recognized at a governmental level, that it exists. Presently, I suppose there are community organizations, like, you know, the Asian Network, which is sort of like a portal for anti-hate crime and, you know, and tackling negative stereotypes. And I know a lot of the community associations, like Chinatown Community Association, have linked up with mental health groups.
Oh, good.
So in the future, it may be that there's some synergy there, that people who've experienced this abuse will have, you know, somewhere to go to be, you know, go into counseling or go into treatment.
yeah, I think there will be a demonstration in London, actually. I think it's planned for June at the moment. So obviously waiting to get the okay. But yeah, hopefully that'll be throughout the summer when the pandemic sort of eases.
I do think that really helps with the demonstrations and marches. You know, there was a lot of flack on marches and demonstrations happening, but I do think it makes a massive, massive things, you know. And I think especially for the Asian community, I think, like I said before, there hasn't been a lot of spotlight shone on it in the mainstream media, and I think it does need more of a spotlight shone on it, you know, that's not just social media, because I think that only hits a certain demographic. I think actually a lot of people of different age groups need to kind of, you know about it.
It's, I suppose the question also is, in the future, is to what extent will our own communities begin to overcome their reticence about reporting, you know, and part of allyship may be to support someone who wants to report, you know, a hate crime. And whether this particular movement will gain traction, you know, I really hope it does. I think the history of it in the UK is more fragmented, because in the US, probably why he knows more about this, there have been actually historians documenting the Asian American experience since I think for quite some time, but certainly the thing that kicked it into start was the Vietnam War. Yeah, in the 70s, you started getting the equivalent hate crimes directed against East Asians because the United States was losing the Vietnam War. And then you started getting a body of people rediscovering the history of Asians in America. But I think for Asians in Britain, or East Asians and Southeast Asians in Britain, it's a much more fragmented thing. You know about bits here, bits there, you know, Liverpool, for example, Cardiff, Bristol has had East Asian communities, but that history really isn't documented in any kind of joined up way.
That's right.
I think, yeah, the history of it, I think is very interesting. I can only relate that to kind of with Black Lives Matter, and the history there is it's very fragmented, and it's like, where are we finding the history? How are we teaching that to the young generation? Yeah.
I think you made a really good point though, Ryan, about in understanding other cultures, it's listen to listen, not listen to respond. Yeah.
And we don't do that. I don't think it. I think this pandemic has helped us do that, because we've been sitting down and we haven't been able to be distracted, and we've had to go, actually, I just have to listen. And I think from the Black Lives Matter, I think that will help the Asian community and the LGBTQ+. When these things happen, people have had to sit and listen to that, because it was such a big movement that you can go, well, you've done it for that ethnic minority, so now you can do it for this minority, and now you can, do you know what I mean? I think that should hopefully be transferable, because you've seen people do it. And I think the Black Lives Matter is such a bigger movement than just the Black Lives Matter. I think it goes for so many different minorities, because if we see the change and we can see that campaigning can do something, then I think it is transferable. We can do this with the Asian community, with the LGBTQ+, with women's rights. We can do it, because if we make enough noise, you know, we want to show change and people listen, and we can do it, we see change happen, then we can do it with loads of other things as well.
And while we have to recognize each group as important in their own right, we are all in this together. Like, we want to all move forward for change.
Yes.
And it's, you know, going on the whole, like what I said before about how it goes in cycles. And this is why I think it's really interesting to see what will happen after COVID. Will it next be some other group that gets attacked, and then it goes round and round in cycles again? But this is the important thing to remember, is that if you support any kind of racism or bigotry, you support racists and bigots. And it might not be you today, but it could be you tomorrow. You know, that's something really important to remember, and we're all in it together.
It's so true. It's so true. I remember saying that to people who were like, oh, Black Lives Matter. Yes, but Black trans lives matter. Black disabled lives matter. Like, it follows on from that. It's like, everyone's lives matter. But right now, we're going through each group, we're going, actually, you can't just pick it apart. Like you're saying, we're all in this together, is what I'm trying to say, is that we are all in this together. And if you're standing, you know, against racism, you stand against racism in every form.
Yeah.